What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Cheeky Midweeky, where we are making strength and conditioning not boring anymore. And we do that by highlighting the practitioners that make this the best field in athletics. And today, we are joined by Coach Peter Ken. Peter is the son of legendary strength and conditioning coach Joe Ken. And in the episode, Peter makes it very clear he was not trying to ride the coattails of his dad. And shout out to him for that, because it could have been very easy for him to try to ride that success. But as he said, that would have been fraudulent. And he doesn't want to be fraudulent. And in fact, I love that about Coach Peter Ken, and he calls out people that are fraudulent or when fraudulent things happen. This is a breath of fresh air and is something that us other strength and conditioning coaches need to be okay with hearing. In this episode, we're going to talk about ways to relate to coaches, best practical advices for working with staff members and coworkers. You're going to love this episode. Enjoy. So, Peter, we've gotten to get to know each other a lot more from the experience we had at Colorado Springs and then being on these professional developmental groups. I'm going to be honest. I had no idea that your dad was your dad. I didn't know that Joe had a kid and that you grew up in this profession. What is that being the son of a strength coach? And I don't want to overly harp on this.
Yeah, no, you're okay.
Person, but like my kids are the kids of a strength coach. Is this a little bit of foreshadowing? Talk about that a little bit.
I would say it really just depends on the person. I think there's probably a few different coaching, especially within strength and conditioning. I think there's a few different father-son dynamics that have happened. But ultimately, this was purely just a my own interest thing. I started to train a little bit more in high school with track and field and started to feel less of a chore and became more enjoyable. And I started to fall in love with it. And then through some of my opportunities with track and went to Appalachian State to do that. And then the conversation really became, hey, if this is something you're interested in, with me and my dad, was this is one of the best schools in the country to really get an exercise science degree. Travis Triplett was my mentor there, who was former president at NSCA. So there's a long-standing history of strength coaches coming out of that sort of thing. So it was really a perfect storm at the end of the day of what happened. But I think it's super individualized. What's it like? I think, interestingly enough, my dad's my dad. And now that I'm in my role, and obviously I've been in a full-time role for a few years, we've talked about it more and more on a more of a professional level. But certainly growing up, my dad didn't really train me that much at all until the back end of my career in college when I had asked him for some things. I learned most of my things from osmosis of just going to all these conferences with him and hearing him talk, and obviously being around all the different connections he has and all the wonderful coaches that been fortunate enough to be around because of him and his coaching tree. So I never had a formal practice of, hey, let's sit down and go over things. And I think a lot of people would assume that. And interestingly enough, I think I felt that a lot in my internship experiences where people thought maybe I knew more than I did. So I would say my internship experiences were probably different than a lot of other people, because I think there was this expectation of, oh, you're Joe Ken's son, all these things. And realistically, I didn't know a lot of things because he's my dad. You just talk to your dad about whatever it is, but it wasn't really a strength conditioning oriented conversation all the time. I mean, I think anyone knows now, like when you go home, you don't want to talk about work. So when my dad was home, we were just talking about father and son things and his role when he was at the Carolina Panthers. My parents are together, but they lived separately during that time, which was a pretty extended period of time. So I didn't see my dad a lot. When I saw him, I didn't want to talk about any of those things. And so it was really organic. There was never any push. I think when I first told him, he said, "Why would you ever want to do that?" Which I would think is probably most people's reaction if you know the field. And it was truly something I just fell in love with on my own. But the journey has been super interesting in seeing how people react to that. And obviously, I think my dad can be somewhat polarizing. You either love him or you hate him. And sometimes that flows down to me a little bit. People I've never met have I wouldn't say show hate, but they're always hesitant to talk to me if they have a bad relationship with my dad, or if they have a great relationship with my dad. They think, oh, you're Joe Ken's son. And sometimes those connections don't work out because I'm different. So it's a very interesting deal. But yeah, interesting experience the whole way of just, I think there was some expectations early on that I had to really learn a lot on my own. And that was better for me in a lot of ways, because I don't feel like I'm indoctrinated in any way, which I think some people would say, at least from what I've seen and what I've heard from other people, is they have this preconceived notion of who I am and what I think. And it's probably all Joe Ken style and this and that. And I just, my own person, as you mentioned, and we've made that a really big separation. Why I never traded off my dad's name in any case. He's never been on my reference list, anything like that. Like we made it a point where he said, if you're getting into this field, you can never do that because it just looks a little fraudulent, honestly, to trade off something that you didn't have any help in building. And so we made a clear, conscious decision about that, honestly, probably my freshman year of college of, hey, if this is what you want to do, you can never use my name. And so that's how it was. And we never really talked about anything. I would sit into his clinics or whatever was going on. I just learn and learn. And luckily, it all worked out for the best. If you're looking at my situation now, I'm very happy with where I'm at. And obviously, it's just different. I know that's a long-winded answer, but it's different from what I think a lot of people expect it to be in terms of like you're sitting down getting basically traded in all the secrets. And that's not how it was. I learned a lot from sitting in with coaching meetings at 7 years old when he had to bring me to work or whatever. I've been in the game for a long time. And the comment I made at last national conference was I've been coming to the NSCA for 27 years. I'm 27 years old, which is in some ways true, right? Because it's a vacation for a lot of coaches. Unfortunately, quote unquote, a vacation, especially if it's in Orlando, you can bring your family and go to Disney World and Universal and all that. So, yeah, I've been in it for a long time, even though I'm relatively young for my age. And I think it just provided a different perspective. I knew what I was getting into right away. I knew what the pay was like. I knew what the work life was like. When I met my girlfriend, I said, hey, I'm going to be working a lot and that's just the way it is. But I love my life and I love my job. And if you can do that, then we can do this. And that was our first date. We've been together for 4.5 years. So it's one of those things where I've always been transparent with it because I really do love it. And it's something I knew I want to do since I was 17, realistically. So
That's fantastic. And I want to dive into the fact that, like you said, you're 27 years old and you're running an Olympic department as
yep.
strength conditioning coach down at SMU. Like, you've got your head on your shoulders. How do you handle that? Because a lot of strength coaches are like, wait a minute, I think I'd be ready, but it's not as easy as people want to make it sound.
Sure. I think I was fortunate enough to be at Army for a year, and Army is so different than a lot of other institutions, and everyone says about their institution, but it really is. Being a service academy, there's a lot of different rules and structures and organizational pieces. And Scott Swanson, who was the director when I was there, gave me that opportunity. Kenna Smoke, who is moved up in her role there, I believe she's a director now. I had a lot of great pieces around me that taught a lot of wonderful things about organization. I saw some things there, and there was things there that I would have done differently, that I knew I wanted to carry on if I ever got a shot to run my own department. But I'm going to sound really narcissistic and cocky. Um, I have set out a goal since I said I want to do this, that I wanted to be better than my dad. And that includes, he was a college strength coach of the year. He was a professional strength coach of the year, NFL strength. There's a lot of accolades there. He's going to win a lifetime achievement award, no doubt. So for me to set that goal, you have to have a higher standard. And so it was never a question of if I was ready. Again, growing up, you see a lot of the ins and outs that most people don't see, especially from administrative pieces, even of having to see, your dad on the phone with coaches all night or talking to an admin all day on the phone or whatever it is on the weekends and all those things. So I knew I was going to be prepared, just because of my personality. And I think a lot of that stems from I just have a lot of self confidence. So when the role came up, because of some situations that occurred at Army, I was given a lot of responsibility there really early on within my first few months because some people were taking leave and I was put in charge of some things there that I don't know if I was ready for then, but that taught me a lot coming into this. So I think a lot of it is if you fake it till you make it, there is some merit to that almost. But if you don't do a good job, they're going to run you out. And that's what I've told people about this job, particularly. I know that there's a lot of people out there based off of things I've seen online or whatever that, hey, how does this person get this job, et cetera? They're not ready, X, Y, Z. If I wasn't ready, I would have been fired. That's just a fact, right? So that's how I see it. I came in with something to prove, a chip on my shoulder of I'm not just Joe Ken's son. I am my own person. Everyone will see that. I know who I am. I know what I can be, and I know what I want to do. So that was the career trajectory. Whether I knew everything in the role or not, it was a role of mine to learn it within the first week and make sure that if I made promises, I delivered on them. And really, that's what I think this job is mostly about. If you can make your head coaches happy, if you can make your student athletes happy, everything else will figure itself out. And that was a big play for me early on here. My first couple months was establishing those trust and relationships, like everyone says, but on a higher level, making sure I was attending every practice I could, every home event, all those pieces to get myself bought into the program early. And when you do that, if your head coaches like you, it's really hard to get in trouble, frankly. So that's really the big piece, I think. If you come in with great intentions and great attitude of what you're trying to do and what you're trying to facilitate, and you make it clear if you do or don't know something, but you're willing to learn, then there's never going to be anything that can go wrong, really. Obviously, there's extenuating circumstances, but ultimately, I think If you're confident in yourself and you know you belong somewhere, then you don't have to worry about it because you're willing to do the work. If there's any hesitation, then it's a little bit harder, I think. And you have to have a little bit of that narcissistic personality to want to be in a leadership role in general. But that also yields yourself. You have to determine if you're going to be a bad narcissist or a good narcissist, right? Like when I come in and I say that genuinely, I'm narcissistic in the fact that I want to be such a good boss, I get everybody raises. I want to get me a raise too. Like I care about me and I want my money and I want to be in a great position. I want everyone to see me as this great person, but I also want to take care of my people so well that everyone thinks of me highly. And that's what I mean by a good narcissist or a bad narcissist. Obviously, you could look at it how you want. Some people be like, well, that's a negative thing, but I want to take care of people so well that people want to work with me. And that's how I see it, as almost as a selfish act instead of just a selfless act. Is I want to be so good that everyone looks up to what I'm doing, what I'm trying to do, and I want the people that work with me to feel valued in everything they do, because it makes me feel better as a person as well.
Get CEUs faster, cheaper, and more convenient than ever before with Strength Coach Network. Hey, it's Justin here to tell you about how Strength Coach Network can now help you out with our premium membership and CEUs to the NSCA and CSCCa. Upon signing up for our premium membership, you will get 2.0 or 10 CEUs immediately. That is an entire year's worth of CEUs that you are able to access from the convenience of your office. No traveling for conferences, no waiting on flights, no eating out, no expensive hotels. Just the good stuff from great coaches. Now, if you need extra CEUs for past years during the reporting period, we can bundle Fundamentals 1 or 2, which also come with 2.0 or 10 CEUs to your purchase. That way, you're able to take care of your CEUs for the best price, most convenient, and learn from some of the best coaches. If you want more help with this, email us at service@strengthcoachnetwork or visit us at strengthcoachnetwork.com, and I would be delighted to help you out.
Yeah.
Is getting that buy-in harder nowadays? Because I feel like that was the formula, at least what I had learned when I was first at Maryland working with the cross-country team in 2012. I remember that. Or when I took over for swim and dive and gymnastics in 2019. But is it harder nowadays that people might have they think, oh, he doesn't really care. Look at him. He's a big, strong guy. Who cares about me in this other sport? Is that harder or what?
Again, I think it really depends on who you are. For me, I've never experienced lack of buy-in on a grand scale. I may have had a few individual athletes who are questioning certain things until we have a conversation, but ultimately, I think student athletes are much smarter than we give them credit for. They can spot, and I'm going to use this word again, I think they can spot fraudulence really quickly, or disingenuousness, right? If you come in with bad intentions, they can read it immediately. They've been doing it their whole life. I think we need to give more credit to them from an emotional intelligence and just a general intelligence of they can see when someone's being genuine or not. But a lot of that does tie back to, this is probably the only lesson I've really asked my dad about. And he told me, if you go to practice, it's amazing what that'll do for you. Just because I don't think a lot of people have the opportunity to do that from a time constraint, whether it's, if you have 6 teams in one day, how do you get to practice? That's a great question. If all those things are overlapping, you can't make it. But if you can find a way to prioritize going to some meeting or an afternoon meeting, or you want to be included on a team dinner after the season, whatever it is, the more you can be around athletes in their environment, the buy-in happens on its own. And there isn't a push to have to make that happen, right? No one probably wants to go to cross-country practice. Let's face it. You don't really see them. They go and then they come.
Meets are pretty intense.
Meets are very interesting, right? Like I have a track background, so I've seen a lot. But practice is they go and then you come back and you're like, hey, but if you make that effort, even if it's 5-10 minutes, I think it means so much more than trying to explain all the cool modalities that you can use in the weight room, because they don't care. At least that's how I see it, right? They're here for their sport. The weight room is often seen as a chore. And if you can try and make it not a chore, and also show that, hey, I'm here for you in your sport itself. I'm not just sitting in the basement if you're in a basement like me. But that was the biggest piece for buying that I got before I went to Army, and I carried it everywhere I've been. And I've worked with 12 different sports, I think, or something like that now. And every single one, just going to practice and being involved has been a huge key for that first week. They see you there and they're like, okay, this is a different person than maybe who was there before.
You call it as it is, and I love it. I'm here for it, and that's been.
I'm trying not to get in trouble.
Like that's why you and I feel like that's why we've hit it off, and I've enjoyed being around you. Have you? I'm guessing you've always been that way, but then my question is, where do you currently see strength and conditioning? And then I want to just sit back and listen to what you're going to talk about, because I want to give you the floor on that.
I would say that's not my dad. That's definitely my mom, where I get that from. She's not afraid to say anything. I think I would really say the bluntness that I try to operate with, I really learned honestly at Army with our athletic director there. I remember one of our first all staff meetings, he said, look, we can't pay as much as we'd like, but that's the reality of it. If you don't like it, we'll try and help you find a different spot somewhere else. But this is where we are. This is our conference. This is what we can do. We're going to pay to the best of our ability. And if we can't do what you need, then we understand if you have to go. And I thought to myself exactly in that moment, man, that transparency was really refreshing. And I think it just lays a groundwork for at least where you're at. And it's really hard to be angry about that in my eyes. If you know exactly where you're at and admin is directly telling you what the deal is from a financial standpoint, or what the outlook is for the institution, and you choose to stay, then you can never be angry about that because they've told you flat out. And so that was a big turning point for me in deciding that's the kind of person I'm going to be, is tell everyone exactly how I see it honestly, because I think we get so worried about trying not to hurt other people's feelings that we end up doing that by beating around the bush. And I think that's one of our biggest caveats in sports, is everyone's trying to keep everyone happy. And sometimes by doing that, we create situations that cause distress. And so I think the more transparency you can have within a department, whether strength conditioning or athletically as a whole, I think provides a greater a lane for people to work through, because they at least understand what the end goal is and what the limitations are. And if they want to make a decision to move, then that's frankly up to them. But at least they know what they're getting into. So I want everyone to know what they get into with me. Of if you invite me on a call, or we're in a group, or we're in a coaching meeting, whatever it is, I'm going to say exactly what I want, because I don't see the point in trying to appease people. And I think that's gained me a lot of favor in some ways. And it's also made some people like, I don't like that guy. And I get that. But my dad's done that in this field too. Right. If you walk into any meeting at the NSCA, my dad walks in, you see everyone go, oh, here he comes. He's ready to drop some bombs or whatever you want to say. Mom definitely does that. My dad does it in this field, but I found that for me, it's just the best way to create an open line of conversation, because then they know who you are. As far as where the field's going as a whole, I wouldn't say I have any controversial things. This profession constantly has ebbs and flows. It's a constant pendulum of back and forth between, sorry, my lights might go out here, between, you're going to have a lot of new modalities that are occurring, whether it's social media or research, even in a traditional sense of, hey, this new research came out, everyone's doing it. Now it's more of a social media, hey, this new movement's coming out, they're doing these new things, everyone's going to do it. And it's going to constantly flow back and forth. And right in the middle is the tried and true programming perspectives that we've all used, whether you're linear, undulating, or your block, or your high-low model, or, are you a triphasic guy? Are you triphasic guy? Are you a tier system guy? Are you a west side guy? Like, obviously there's hundreds of other pieces, right? But when it all comes back to is the sound principles of training that we all have learned, whether through our undergraduate programs, our master programs, or through our certification processes through the CSCCa or the NSCA, those ingrained and kind of basic trainings are always going to remain constant.
What's up, everybody? Taking a quick break from the show to talk about one of our sponsors, TeamBuildr. I've been using TeamBuildr since 2019 when I was at Towson. I still use it with my remote athletes. I also use it at Goldfinch, which is the private sector gym I train at, and we use it at Centennial, which is the high school that I'm working at. Now, if you're printing on lift cards because you say, oh, I can't afford TeamBuildr, guess what? TeamBuildr has a pre-written grant that you can locate on their website. You simply change the name of you, your organization, and the areas that they highlighted, and they can help you get TeamBuildr at your facility, your university, whatever it is, so that way you can optimize how you train your athletes with this software. Now, TeamBuildr is also a part owner in the Plyomat. The Plyomat is something that I utilize at Goldfinch, and it helps you be able to see how high somebody jumped, the ground contact time, and RSI. You can get all that conveniently right there. You can reach out to your rep from TeamBuildr to be able to get more information on the Plyomat. It's fast, it's reliable, it's convenient, and it's trusted by coaches worldwide. Check them out as well as TeamBuildr in the link down below.
And I think people have tried to put out new research on best modalities, and there's tweaks and they change a little bit, but ultimately training is training. And so we're going to constantly see ebbs and flows, and there's going to be people who obviously capitalize off the ebbs and flows. But ultimately, I think if you have a great basic understanding of programming in general and periodization in general, that's going to carry you further than any kind of niche system, because it is the most operable between sports. If you can conduct needs analysis, you can determine what an athlete needs, you're going to be able to program just fine. And so for me, The profession's moving in a really interesting way. We see the NSCA going to this CASCI program. I have questions on how does that limit the field, or how does it make it more competitive? How does it potentially negate some students from being able to achieve what their goal is, maybe, right? If you're not a CASCI accredited program, what does that process look like to get your certification? And so are we limiting people's opportunity, or are we creating a more structured process to create a more enduring and, I guess, rigorous testing protocol, if you will? I think that's the big discrepancies between the two main organizations, right? The CSCCA, some people I would say from just a written test, I would assume both the tests are comparable, but there's obviously a couple more steps with the CSCCA in terms of you have to do that internship underneath someone who they consider to be a great strength coach, or whatever that piece is. And then there's also the practical portion of that test. Obviously, the NSCA is trying to create something maybe a little bit more different, but along the same lines of creating rigor. So both, to me, are very similar. You could potentially give the edge to the CSCCA in terms of the rigorousness right now, and I'm sure most people would, and I wouldn't disagree with that necessarily because of those two extra pieces that you see. But ultimately, the baseline knowledge is the same from a textbook perspective. I know good coaches that have their SCCC, and I know bad coaches that have theirs. And I know the same thing for the CSCS, right? And so I don't know if either one is substantial in weeding out can you coach or not, right? Like, I know bad coaches with both, and I know bad coaches with none, and I know great coaches with no certifications, and I know great coaches on both sides. So the coaching piece is something that I think as a profession we have to figure out as a whole, whether that's more practical modalities from an educational side of thing at the institutional setting, on the academic side of the house, or as we are working on our field guide, or our field manual for internships and that sort of thing. So there has to be some type of meshing between what we want to do as a profession in adapting to creating a more coach heavy environment, because I think a lot of internships lack that. And I understand you don't want to put an athlete in a bad situation with an intern who's never coached, but we have to find ways to integrate active coaching into our learning processes, whether informal internship, a formal internship, a paid internship, an internship for credit, an internship for certification, whatever it is. That's the piece that we're missing most. And hopefully that's the piece that we continue to build on the most. And I think our organizations are trying to do that, but it's really hard to do that and appease everyone. So from our state, I see us moving, hopefully continuing to provide better care for students, because that's really what we're here for. It's obviously great to have success and to have national championships and to have all Americans on all those pieces. But ultimately, I do think the job itself is fairly selfless, right? We don't see a lot of the gain. If you win a national title, it's your head coach and your student athletes, and maybe some assistant coaches are getting awards, but very infrequently are the strength coaches highlighted in that. And there are some programs that do that, but for general purposes, I would say most people wouldn't disagree with that. So I think it's a selfless type of profession, or at least it can be, depending on the kind of person you are. But ultimately, we're moving into some interesting areas. We'll see how, at least in the Power Four conferences, how some of this NIL stuff turns out, and revenue sharing and all those pieces in terms of how it affects us. I obviously think the FLSA salary increase, and if it still gets enacted with our current or our new administration coming in on the presidential side, we'll see how that affects things, right? Because you're going from a $43,000 salary basically capped to a 58, and here in Texas that was struck down, and so we won't see the impacts of that change. And I think a lot of other states are following suit on that for the time being, and so we'll see if it's something that continues or if it doesn't. But if it does continue, then you're going to have a lot of angry older strength coaches who are now been like, hey, I've been at $58,000 for 10 years, and we just hired someone with no experience who is now making $58,000, and how does that make sense? So there is some financial implications to a lot of this for our profession and how things work, and we'll see what an upper administration within athletic departments do with that. But ultimately, the profession will continue to do what it does, and that's adapt with time and figure pieces out. It's really interesting that, from at least my perspective, we're at the bottom of the total poll in athlete care because we're not a requirement by the NCAA. And that's something that I brought up in one of our last meetings that we were in together, is we've really done a disservice, or the organizations have done a disservice by not working together. And I understand why they don't, right? Like, I understand the split of why the CSCCA branched off and left the NSCA. And I have many things to say about the NSCA, which I've said in our own NSCA meetings, and I've said to admin there as well, that strength and conditioning coaches need to continue to find ways to fight and band together. And there's this like weird transgression that we have between both of these certifying organizations, when it really doesn't matter. I think the big argument is like our certification is better, ours is. It's like, it doesn't matter. We're the two leading. We should be the only two considered strength and conditioning models for the college. And that's what I believe. And I'm sure some people would disagree, but I think they're the two highest and they should be the only ones leading our profession. And because we haven't made a definitive statement on that, and because the NCAA hasn't made a definitive statement on what they considered a nationally accredited certification, that we've been left behind in comparison to athletic trainers and what their model looks like, and them being a requirement by the institution, but in no way, shape, or form is strength conditioning a requirement by the NCAA. So we need to do more work in trying to continue our path in solidifying our role within athletic departments. Beyond salary increases, we need to continue to establish ourselves as a well-founded profession. And obviously, relatively speaking, it's a newer profession compared to most other jobs in athletics. So it's just going to be an interesting way that we figure this out. Whether I see it this way, if the CSCCa and the NSCA do not work together, we're only going to continue to hurt ourselves. And that's going to come from both higher levels of those organizations figuring a way to bridge the gap between how that works. And I think both sides are like, we've tried to reach out on this and they didn't want to work with us. And I just don't buy it anymore. And I'm not saying they need to join forces and become one, but they definitely need to work together in trying to institute some things within the NCAA or even within conference legislation, whether it's the ACC or the Big Ten or the SEC or whoever, to try and establish some norms where we can really start to elevate our worth. Because everyone tells us that you mean a lot to our program, and then we're paying people $45,000. So I don't know how you can mean a lot and get paid $45,000 to work 60 hours a week.
When the word culture gets said to you within all of that, what do you think, what instantly goes through your mind?
I've actually been thinking about this a lot. I don't know how much I believe in the word culture, frankly. I don't know how much I believe in the word family either. I think those two words get thrown around a lot of, hey, our culture is this, our family is this. I prefer the word community. And I say that mostly because your family are people that you can't leave behind. You got to take them with you. And we don't see that in athletics. We see people get left behind all the time, or people advance. Sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. So I prefer the word community in terms of, hey, we're a community working towards a common goal. And an individual team may have a family bond. Like I would say most of our teams would say, hey, we're a family. And I wouldn't disagree with them on that piece, but I would say as an athletic department as a whole, we're a community. And we're a community trying to reach the same thing. And that's going to mean that there's some dissent. And it's a healthy thing to be able to have conversations and be transparent about, hey, this is working, this is not. And so I prefer the term community, but that's different from your question. Culture. I think that there is certain things rooted in stigma. I've seen it here. I've seen one of our teams really since for 3 seasons evolve in their culture and what the students have wanted and what the coaching staff has wanted and what they have changed from being more of a team that focuses on the individual players are focusing on themselves versus focusing on the greater outcome. So culture is a strange word because everyone will give you a different definition. And you'll never hear the same definition twice. And that's why I don't even try and define it, because I don't think it is definable. And again, that's why I typically shy away from that. Some people would describe culture probably as a group of individuals working towards a common goal. Congratulations. That's every job I've ever heard of in my life, is people are working towards a common goal. So from a cultural piece, I think it's better to more align yourself with just general values of, hey, we're going to value human beings here. And if that means that you're supposed to have 2 weeks off a year, we're going to give you 2 weeks off a year, no matter what. Or if you're only supposed to be here working 40 hours a week, we're only going to make you work 40 hours a week. And we're not going to ask you for unpaid labor, right? So I think values are really what people are talking about when they're talking about culture. And I would say that's pretty much where I'll leave it. I could probably go deeper, but I don't know if culture is the right word. I think values are the right word, whether you're talking about a coach talking to athletes, hey, the kind of culture we're trying to create, and then they list a bunch of values.
What's up, everybody? Taking a quick break from the show to talk about one of our sponsors, Hawken Dynamic. I've been using Hawken Dynamics ever since I was at Towson. Still utilize it today when I'm at the private sector at Goldfinch. Even brought the plates from Goldfinch over to Centennial to do some force plate testing with the football team there. We've done force plate testing with other high school athletes. It is something that you need to get. If you want more help with it about how to practically use it and you want to reach out to us, feel free to reach out to us at service@strengthcoachnetwork.com. Not only do I utilize utilize it with lower body assessments. I use it with upper body assessments, plyo push-ups, prone Y assessments. You can also utilize it for what I call an upper body isometric mid thigh pull, where essentially you're doing a push up at the strongest range and you're pushing into an immovable force, so a barbell, same way you do an isometric mid thigh pull. Like I said, been using them for years, valid, reliable. The customer service is fantastic. Go check out Hawk and Dynamic in the link down below, and you will not be disappointed.
The values that we want our team to have are X, Y, and Z, and we're trying to establish something that will provide X, right? That would be my general gist on it, and I don't have a great answer for you outside of that.
Yeah, and I ask because a lot of the time coaches, like I heard an athletic trainer say to me, he's usually the strength coach, like the head coach wants you to instill their culture. Then how come that's not in my contract? Or like, how do you define that? Again, I can't show success on such a vague thing like you just said right there, and it's somebody else's culture versus I thought you hired me to get them bigger, faster, stronger, more robust, like all of those things.
Yeah, definitely. There's been experiences where coaches say, hey, I need you to be this for me, or I need you to do this for me. I know my personality isn't very aggressive. I may need you to be a little bit more, on top of the guys and getting them to push and all those things. And again, I don't know if that's really culture, but also how much can we influence culture, I think is sport dependent. There are teams where the weight room is just not going to influence your culture all that much. I think sports like football, I think really team-based sports have much more of a cultural influence if that's where we want to use from a weight room perspective. But individual-based sports, it's really hard to build that because most of those student athletes, while the team success is great, in an individual sport, the idea is for you to be successful, right? So it's hard to build a culture around that or to enforce cultural values. But also, if you don't like what someone's doing as a head coach, the best way to get change is for you to take away their sport. It's not going to be through quote unquote punishment in the weight room, which is not legal, by the way. But right, hey, they need to do this in the weight room, or we're going to run them more. Now they're just mad at me. And now they don't trust me anymore, and they're just upset with the weight room, and now they don't want to come in anymore. So you've actually ruined the culture that we're trying to create. If you want to make an impact, and this is just my personal belief, if you want to make an impact as a head coach and you want to change the way that your student athletes are going about their day, then you have to impact them, quote unquote, where it hurts, which is taking away playing time, which is really hard to do when you're relying on their playing time to keep your job. And so it's a really catch-22 of like, it's easy for me to say that and say, hey, this person missed class and you don't like that, and you want to, don't let them play the first 5 minutes of the next game. Okay, this is our All-American XYZ player on X team. If I don't play them and we lose, that negatively impacts how I look with our athletic director, and I can lose my job. It's a really hard conversation that I think has a lot of nuance, but I don't think going about change or a head coach utilizing the strength coach to elicit change helps us. I do think it's a role that we've taken on for a really long time. I would like to say it's phasing out, but I don't know if it is, where we are often the bad guys because head coaches don't want to be, and I don't blame them. I wouldn't want to be either. I don't want to be, which is why I don't do it a lot of the time. But it's an interesting role. We have to decide, I think individually, you have to decide, hey, is this the person I'm going to be? Is this the kind of coach I want to be? Or are these the barriers I put up? And again, that's another hard conversation, because if you decide you're not willing to do that, who's to say the head coach won't make a change to find someone who will? So I think it all stems from having a genuine conversation with the powers that be of determining, hey, is this something that the administration can put a halt on? Are we going to say definitively, as our AD or our sport admin going to say, absolutely, this is not allowed. Here's how we'll take care of these things. Sometimes it's not a problem to ask your sport admin for solutions in that regard, because they can help keep the weight off your back and the head coach's back and create a dynamic where we can maybe have some consequences for actions that are not detrimental to student athlete health or well-being, but can also elicit a change on the back end. So I think a lot of times we try and stay within our own groups of head coach said this, I have to do this, or I can tell them no, but then what's the reaction of that? Do they like me anymore? Well, maybe not. So do I want to do that? It's always okay to have that conversation with your head coach and just tell them flat out and say, hey, would you be okay if we asked our sport admin over what a different potential solution is for this, so that we don't ruin, quote unquote, our culture in the weight room. And so I'm not losing the buy-in I've gotten from athletes because I just made this kid do a stadium and now he hates me for the next 3 months and I've lost all the ground I've made. There are other ways to find solutions to the problem. And ultimately you just have to ask, because hopefully your sport admins have been around for a long time. They're used to finding creative solutions to problems that are hard to address. That's why they're in those positions. And so it's important to do that. And then at least you're in alignment with what the institution as a whole wants to.
You keep talking about admin, and my question for you now is, how do you best recommend coaches interact with their admin and be respectful? Because I feel like a lot of the time coaches be like, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. And you're not giving off that vibe. And so I want coaches to hear somebody to speak life into the way that it should look so they can have success.
Yeah, we're lucky that our weight room is in the same building that a lot of our upper admin are in, because a lot of them come down here and train. And so it starts with the, hey, how are you? And all those pieces. But I think the big thing that you can do is continue to show you're an asset to everybody. And when I say that, yes, you have to make sure your head coaches are happy. Yes, you have to make sure your student athletes are happy. But you also want to make sure that you're at least having conversations with the sport admin. One of the things that I've always done is, especially when I first got here, I talked to a lot of the sport admin over our team over, hey, what are some things that were happening before that you had heard from conversations with the coaches that maybe they didn't like, and how can I pursue to change this to make the program overall better for you? I think the way that I've always approached it is, I don't ever want you to have a problem from me, but I can't do that unless you tell me what you need. And the sport admin will hear it all, right? The head coaches will tell the sport admin, this is a problem, I need to have it changed. So they know what the issues are. And if you just directly say, hey, look, I'd love to sit down and talk with you about what has previously happened. What were the great things? What were the bad things? What were the okay things? How can I continue to facilitate the great things? How can I potentially create a solution for some of the negative outputs that this coach may have seen from our program historically with strength and conditioning? Was it scheduling issues? Okay, can we work around the schedule? No. Okay, was there a different creative solution that I can talk with the head coach? But I think your sport admin, for me, really provide an outlet for you to have a conversation with the head coach without having to have one sometimes, because the sport admin, typically, at least the ones I've been with, are smart. If you go to them with a problem, they're not going to go tell the head coach typically, unless they're really close. And in those cases, you do have to be careful. But every sport admin I've had a conversation with, when I do have a problem about something, I've said, hey, look, I'd like to keep this between us. But I'm trying to find a solution. Here's the conversation I've had with coach. Here are their responses. Here are my responses. Here's the bottom line of what's going to happen, unless you have a different opportunity for us to create a solution. Because I know at the end of the day, if I create a problem, it's going back to them anyways. So if you work with them early before a problem occurs, they see it as you not creating a problem, right? And so now there's a greater affinity to want to talk to you in further circumstances. But it can be, again, hard. When I first got here, I had 9 teams and one part-time employee. And so I just truly didn't have a lot of time in the day to go up and have those conversations, but you have to force yourself to do that. Whether it's, I only have 45 minutes for me to train, but you don't get to train today. Or whether it's a, hey, I know it's an after hours thing. Would you be open to having a phone call after you leave tonight? I know I don't want to bother you at home, but there's something I want to talk to you about regardless, blah, blah, blah. Those pieces. You have to find creative ways to your own problems to talk to the people that really have a hand in the system. And if you do that and you establish those connections early and you show that you're an ally, not only for the student athlete, but for the institution as a whole, and that you're really just trying to negate problems and you're only trying to find ways to be successful, that's the best way to do it, because their jobs are centered around problems. And if you can help them reduce problems, they are going to like you. Now, I have had my fair share of people of sport admin that I've tried to talk to that are just like instantly don't like you. I don't know why they don't like me, but they've instantly just, nope, I don't want to do this. I just want to stay in my lane, and that's fine.
Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about one of our sponsors, Powerlift. I used Powerlift when I was at Harvard, Maryland, and the University of Iowa. I was also part of the staff that had the new weight room at the University of Iowa, the 32-rack, beautiful facility. I was a part of that. I also have Powerlift's equipment nowadays. Powerlift Strong, made here in the great state of Iowa in the great country of the United States. They're able to work with you on any customizations that you need, logos, height, whatever it is, the limitations that you have. Their equipment is strong. The people there, they're very good people. Check them out in the link down below. And if you have any questions on how to work with them, reach out to us at service@strengthcoachnetwork.com, and we would be delighted to help.
But I would say in general, I would say 95% success rate in just directly addressing a problem with a sport admin and saying, look, I don't want coach to be upset. Here's the problem, right? Like they want to lift at 9:30. It cannot happen because of, you have to bring your data. Like it can't happen because I have a team that finishes at 9, another team that starts at 10. There's a 30-minute window here. There's not enough time to set up and break down and then get them in and warm them up. Like it can't happen. Here are the other solutions. is there a way for us to work on this together to find something that can work for the head coach so that we can both keep ourselves out of trouble? And that's a fantastic way to start those conversations because it's easy too. And don't bring them your hardest problem first. Bring them a very easy problem first, and then work from there.
Speaking of problems, scheduling a weight room can be difficult.
Yes.
What is if you're going to reverse engineer it and make sure that you get a good schedule out there, what should coaches do first, second, third to be able to accommodate everybody as best as possible, understanding that you're not going to be able to?
So when I first got here, Olympic sports and football shared this weight room. And to be honest with you, I don't get anxiety. I'm very fortunate that I've never had to suffer from anything like that. The schedule was the biggest piece of my day that honestly ruined my day every single day. And I say that it was no fault of anyone in the weight room itself. It's just, hey, I'll give an example. This didn't happen a lot, but it was something that was always looming over my mind because it can happen. If football changes a practice time and it pushes their lift back 15 minutes, that has now cascaded on to potentially 6 to 8 teams that are still having to train throughout the day. So then that's 6 to 8 conversations you have to have with head coaches about, hey, we got to push your lift back 15 minutes. That doesn't work with class schedule. So what do we do now? Like, it was a huge piece for me that was really something that I had to work through a lot to find a great system. And so when football was in our room with us, and I want to talk about this in 2 segments, with football, without football, what I have done is I've said, hey, I'll send out an email to all of our head coaches. It goes out at the exact same time to everybody. They're all on the same email chain. Here are the available for us, right? We had specific time blocks that were for our football team to train based around their class schedules, based around their practice schedules. These are when they had to train. There was no wiggle room. These are our blocked out times. These are our available times. In-season teams get priority. Out-of-season teams don't. You need to send me your A, B, and C option. I will do my best to get you an A accommodation. If I can't, I will then try to get your B accommodation. If I can't, I will get your C accommodation. And if that's not possible, we will have an individual conversation in your office to figure out what time slots work best. And it's also a first come, first served basis. And so what I say by that is the first person that emails me back gets their first choice. And so that not only can alleviate the pain of you email a coach, hey, I need your schedule, and they don't get back to you for 3 weeks. But it also provides a sense of urgency of this has to happen now, and everyone wants their things. So you get all the information really quickly. So you don't have to worry about, I know our X team is really important here, and they haven't emailed me back. No, like this is the route. And you have to make sure, for us, I explained this process to our admin and said, hey, are you comfortable with this? If someone doesn't respond, are you comfortable with the consequences of them maybe not getting the spot they want? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. Now it's not just me. Now I have backing from admin as well. And that's, again, a really easy problem or an easy task to get you that buy-in like we just talked about. Hey, here's my thought process. Does it seem fair? Yes. Are you okay with the consequences of if a coach is upset about that? Will you have my back? Yes. Great. Email gone. And that's really the best way to do it for me. You create a priority of in-season teams because that makes sense. And most coaches would agree. Now, if you're track, you're lucky. You got maybe 2 or 3 seasons, so you're always in priority. But for the most part, that makes sense to most coaches. First come, first serve basis makes sense to most coaches. And some would argue, what if I'm on the phone and I don't see your email? I understand. It's a free playing field. Everyone's getting the same rules. No one's being treated differently outside of the aspect of are you or are you not an in-season priority. So that's how we did it with football in the room. Now it's the same process, just minus the blackout, right? Like, hey, here's our blank canvas. And you tell me what you can do. Again, provide me multiple options. And there's always still dissent, right? Last semester we had talked and you said that this would be a possibility. And it's like, at that point I did. I try never to make guarantees of, hey, I can't guarantee you're going to have the same time next semester. It's my goal to make that happen. And usually that's how it works out. Most teams don't change their training times. They'll usually change their scheduling for classes and practices around training times because they know it can be tough to get into a room. But typically that's how I've done it. And again, having the help from admin, having at least someone else review your process to make sure that you are being fair does help as well. And then if you have an upset coach, you can have that conversation with them and their sport admin because you've already got it backed. And then it's like, now what? We're going to have to find a solution either way. So you're not getting this time. We got to find something else, but let's figure out the best solution for you and your team. And it never hurts to throw in. And I do believe this, coach. I realize that this didn't work out for you. I want you to be successful, right? You're getting paid on wins and losses. If this schedule affects you that much, let's try and find another solution. Maybe I can talk to another coach about changing their stuff around, but if they can't, That's just a realistic reality. But I want you to win because it helps me look good too. And so how can I help you help me, and vice versa? But we need to find a solution that works best for you. And I'm going to do everything I can. And if you really explain it like that, hey, I'm just limited, man. It's not I don't like you. I want you to win because it makes me look good if you win a national title. Like, you think I don't want you to win? I want you guys to win. So you say it like that, and sometimes coaches go, "Oh yeah, they're not against me," right? You got to make sure that they know you're not against them, and that's the best way I've found so far. And again, it's not perfect, but again, like a 90% hit rate for most of our times, and it's been really nice to work with that. And sometimes it's, hey, I slide a team back 15 minutes, slide a team up 15 minutes. Coach, does this work? Great. Now we got both teams rocking at the same what they really wanted. So
You teed up my next question perfectly. Keys to head coach and head strength coach success in the relationship.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be the one thing, but you're like, hey, here are some top things that you young coaches you need to be doing.
Don't, and this is something one of my admin told me when they first came in, was I never want to be surprised. Well, neither do head coaches, right? They've got too much on their plate, especially with the transfer portal now, and how crazy recruiting has gotten. So there's so much on a head coach's plate. The last thing that they want is another surprise in their day. And so I always really try to over communicate with my head coaches, almost to the point of annoyance of, you're never going to be surprised by anything that happens. If like, we just repainted our weight room, and I was having conversations with our coaches like a couple months leading up to it. Hey, I still don't have the dates. As soon as I have the dates, I'll tell you, but know that the weight room will probably be closed for this duration of time. Here are the solutions to that. Like, for us, this weight room's closed. Can we utilize the new indoor complex that we have on the other end of the field? Talk to the strength coaches over there. Do you have any availability? Coach, this weight room's going to be closed. Here's the availability over there. And sometimes they're like, you know what? Don't worry about it. We'll just cancel this day and we'll get back on the next. But if they do want to train, at least you've given them options.
What's up, y'all? Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about another one of our sponsors, Vitruve. I've been utilizing Vitruve for a while now, and I absolutely love the convenience of this app. The encoder is at a price that you cannot beat compared to the competitors. Also, I don't personally like the camera apps. I've known that they continue to break down, and I really enjoy having this encoder attached directly to the bar. Vitruve does that. Not only does it do that, but it'll show me velocity loss during the set, shows me average velocity, all of it right within the app. Not only that, for the app on the individual athlete, there's a Vitruve Teams app where now, as the coach, I can see all the results from my athletes. I can API that into my TeamBuildr, and now everything that I'm trying to do, get better competition, better intent in the weight room, I am able to do with Vitruve. If you want more information about them, click the link down below, or you can ask us questions directly at service@strengthcoachnetwork.com, and we would love to answer those questions for you.
The best way to build a relationship with a head coach is, again, continually make sure that you never surprise them. And that doesn't mean if you have an issue that comes up and you go to, obviously it's going to be like, oh, I didn't know that. But if you wait till the last second to tell someone about a change, and there is no opportunity or time to digest that change, and there's no opportunity to find other solutions, I would be angry too.
Yeah.
So if you're worried about, man, this just happened, if I go tell coach, they're going to be upset. It's better than them being upset in 2 weeks when you tell them they don't have 2 weeks to find a solution, right? So the more time to a problem is always better in aiding in finding the possibilities. But also with that is ensuring, again, I think this is part of my last answer too, ensuring that the coach understands that you recognize their job is based off of wins and losses. And some people in the athletic department may disagree. I'm sure we have people here that disagree. Coaches get fired when they don't win. Okay, so your job depends on winning. Fact. How can I help you do that? Make sure that they understand that you're aware of that. Look, coach, I get it. You got a tough job. You got 18 to well, now it's 27-year-olds, but relatively 18 to 22-year-olds that are here that you're relying on to get you wins. I need to help you be a part of that, and I don't ever want to be in the way of that. So if there's a problem with the way I'm doing things, communicate with me so I can help you fix it. If there's something that you want to have done, communicate with me so I can fix it. If I disagree with you, I will tell you, but we will find a creative solution. I think a lot of times you have this, and I've been guilty of saying this too. Why would a head coach tell me what to do? I don't go to their practices and tell them what to do. You just lost your job. Just like, it does irritate me, and I get the conversation. I would never go to a practice and say, hey, that drill is stupid. However, there are power dynamics that play within the athletic department that if you don't like, don't get into the profession. You have to understand that the head coaches are typically of a higher priority than auxiliary staff, such as ourselves, because of what they provide to an institution. So if you understand that and you're willing to accept that's the terms of negotiation of the game we play, then you have to understand that what they say has to matter. And the conversation that I've always had anytime I've worked with the new coaches, coach, you've been in the field for a long time, regardless if they have or haven't, always say that. It helps. Coach, I know you've been in the field for a long time. If there are things that you know you want in your program, you let me know and I'll do my best to fit them in. It may not always work, but if I can fit them in, I'll do it, because it'd be stupid of me not to know your experience. You've obviously worked with a number of different strength coaches, whether as an assistant, as an intern, or as a head coach or associate head coach, whatever it is. You have a lot of experience working with strength coaches. You've seen some things. If there are pieces you like, let me know. If I disagree with you, I will tell you. But if we can find a closer solution that is similar to what you want, that I'm also comfortable with, let's make that piece happen. And that is a much easier conversation than, look at this is what they're doing at XY institution. Why aren't we doing that? Because it's stupid and I don't think it works, right? Like, you can't say that. So you got to get out of your own way. You have to understand who you're talking to. You have to understand the brevity of the conversation. If this is a decision maker at the institution, the closer you can get to helping them make those decisions, the better, because then the trust has continued to develop. But if you're a constant no right out of the gate, you've already opened yourself up to a head coach not liking you. And that doesn't mean you have to be a yes man and be here on a Saturday and a Sunday year round, and you're here for 52 weeks, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. But it does mean you have to be open to the negotiation piece, because you have a job because they have a job. If they didn't have a job, you wouldn't be here. There would be no need for us. So remember that and understand that in the conversations you have with your coaches, and be open and willing to maybe secede an exercise that you think is stupid or dumb into your program if it makes the head coach happy and it doesn't put an athlete at risk. You may say, this doesn't make any sense for it to be in here. I don't think that it meets our needs analysis. I don't think that it has any benefit to us on the pitch. Does it hurt them? No. Does it make them worse? No. Great. Put it in the program, because now your head coach likes you more. And that's how you get out of your own way in a lot of the instances of building that trust with the head coach, because that's mostly what our role is. But also, again, being at practice isn't just for the athletes, it's for the head coach too. Now they see you at least watching their sport, trying to understand their sport. Don't ask them questions at practice, but if you're at a meeting with them, hey, I noticed you guys do this. Like, you played the sport, how does that feel? Or ask your athletes, hey, how are you feeling, and all these pieces, and show them that you're trying to get a better understanding if it's a sport you've never worked with. And then that again makes them believe that you really are trying to help them win games, because ultimately that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help our athletes win. We're trying to help our coaches win. We're also trying to make sure, again, being as correct as possible, everyone's healthy, happy, all those pieces. But at the end of the day, we're still in a business model, and you have to treat it like a business that also has very real personal implications, right? It's not just business. It's not just personal. It's business and personal. That's the role that we're in. And so you have to meld those things together instead of acting like it is black and white.
Within our world as strength coaches, as we educate and learn, what have you seen from the field of research and like new publications or new research that's coming out? What are the trends that you're starting to see?
Everything is obviously moving towards the sports science aspect, right? It's the new big frontier for us. We've seen obviously the high performance model start to integrate itself into a number of bigger institutions that have the resources to do it, where they have a director of high performance or a director of sports performance that oversees athletic training, mental health, strength conditioning, sports science, whatever it may be. But sports science is obviously the new realm, whether you're looking at VBT stuff, which has obviously been going on for a long time, but everyone releases a new article on VBT almost every year, or every month, it feels like, of what the new standards of practice are, or what the percentages are in relation to VBT model, et cetera, all those pieces. There's always obviously consistency in regards to new modalities and trying to reduce injuries. I think the most consistent basis is if you are typically stronger, right? Your ligaments and tendons are stronger, and so you're at a reduced risk. But I don't know if injury prevention is, I don't believe it's the right word, right? My dad always says protect. I say I'm going to protect you as much as possible. I can't prevent anything. Things just happen, and that's just an unfortunate part of sport. But yeah, that's where I'm seeing a lot of research right now. Obviously, there's a lot of, I don't know how much new research I'm really seeing in terms of training modalities, but I do think there's a lot of research being put into a lot of these AMS systems and utilizing AI as a model to track different things, build out different platforms such as perch or your stat sports or your catapults or your rock days, your, whatever it is. I think there's probably more research. At least the research I'm interested in is more on organizational patterns and institutional structure than it is coaching necessarily. Because again, I don't think coaching is relatively that hard if you know the basics. And again, with the ebbs and flows, it's like BFR is the hot thing one day, and then the next day no one's doing it and they're cupping again, which has been happening in the East for hundreds of years. So is any research new research? Hard to tell. But I think right now, at least what I'm seeing is mostly the velocity based pieces, whether it's catapult data or again, stat sports data and velocity based training or jump based metrics, right? Counter movement jump has always been a part of research for this basically since we could track it in terms of an assessment piece or a fatigue monitoring metric, all those things like that. So
last question for you to
yeah,
respect your time.
of course.
What would, having this last kind of little opportunity to speak to the profession as a whole, what would be your like thing that you really wanted to leave or resonate with strength coaches? Like, hey, pay attention to this or focus on this. What would be your resounding message?
You need to pay attention to more things outside of strength conditioning. You have to understand the structural powers within your institution, who holds the value, who's the decision makers. And I think that also extends to both the CSCCa and the NSCA. We have to do more to continually educate what our value is. And I don't know if I have a great answer for what our value is, honestly, but the NSCA, the CSCCA, we have to continue to push and show that we are a voice within those organizations, especially within the NSCA, which is not only a coaching organization, but also does a lot of other things. And we have to make ourselves a priority across the board. But we also need to have a better understanding of how institutions run as a whole, both on the academic side, both on the athletic side. And we have to have a better understanding of how we can move ourselves up in upward trajectory within our role. And that doesn't mean just getting an assistant AD title to get paid more and not doing anything with it. It means getting an assistant AD title, getting your money, and also finding ways to work your way up on the institutional infrastructure to be a decision maker. That's the way that we're going to be able to not only create upward mobility for ourselves, but also bring our staff with us and hopefully create a change for the better. But I think the awareness is there for the most part. We need to continually push our organizations and our institutions to see us as more valuable than what we are being portrayed as right now.
There's no better spot to end it right there, folks. That's exactly why I wanted him to come on to educate you all. Thanks for coming on, Peter, and I will be seeing you soon, man.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Thanks for watching that video. If you enjoyed it, click right here for videos just like that, and make sure you click here to subscribe to our channel. Have a great rest of your day.